In the first part of this video, I'll show you how to prepare and paint a 3D printed facade for the rear of an HO scale brownstone. In the second part of this video, I'll show you how to assemble the HO scale brownstone using the 3D printed parts we've made and some cardstock. This video is part 2 in the HO scale brownstone series. If you haven't already, please check out part 1 of this series in the link below. But if you have, let's get started putting this brownstone together. For this project, you'll need some supplies to get started. Here's a full list of the materials you will need in addition to the 3D printed brick facade. I'll put the link for the STL file as well as links to purchase some of the things that are harder to come by in the description below. I've received a lot of questions on my print settings and setup. I've been using a Creality Ender 3 with a 0.2mm nozzle for all my prints thus far. Things can be a little trickier with a 0.2mm nozzle, so I like to print all my PLA projects at around 210 to 215 degrees Celsius, and really make sure that the print bed is level. Creality printers are an easy and inexpensive way to get into the hobby, so I'll put a link to where you can also purchase one of these in the description below. I'm hoping to buy a couple more printers so I can really start speeding up my production. In removing the model, it is likely we have to use our X-Acto knife to separate the model from the printer bed. Cut under one corner, then use the supplied spatula to slowly pry the model off the print bed. I like to remove any large bits of flashing on the surface of the model, also using the X-Acto knife. Printing the model at a higher temperature means there is a greater chance of stringing or flashing to occur, but I like to keep it at such high of a temperature to mitigate any clogs that might happen since the nozzle is so small. We can also take this time to lightly sand the edges of the model to remove any large lumps and imperfections along the side. 120 grit sandpaper does the trick just fine. Now we can prepare the model for painting. In the last video, we used a filler primer to mitigate layer lines in our print. However, since this model is so thin, and there are such tiny details in the bricks, we don't want something that's going to fill so many of the gaps. Instead, we want something that will create a nice surface to apply paint to. I'm using this Krylon Black paint and primer. Ideally, we want to use black to prevent any light from coming through the model. If you're using a black filament, you can use a different color of primer. But like last time, shake the can until you hear the ball rattle, and spray an even layer of paint across both sides of the model. Once dry to the touch, we can clean up any remaining flashing on the windows using our X-Acto knife. Now let's get ready to paint. We can use brown to emulate brick color. I'm using this Vallejo flat brown from Vallejo's basic color set. I'll put a link to where you can buy this set in the description. To thin our paint, we can use our alcohol and water mixture by spraying some from the spray bottle. Then, using a paintbrush, we can apply the paint to the surface of the model. Coating the surface liberally will make sure every brick and nook is covered. When this coat is dry, we should be left with a complete coverage of the surface of the model. I like to apply a second coat of brown just to make sure. When all the brown paint is dry, we can prepare our wash for the mortar. I'm using Vallejo white, but an off-white or light gray would work just as well. However, it is important to make whatever paint you use as thin as possible by using our alcohol and water mixture. Once that's ready, we can spray some more of the alcohol water mixture onto the surface of the model, so when we apply the mortar wash, paint can flow freely across the surface into all the little crevices. We apply the wash by gently dabbing the paintbrush onto the now wetted surface, letting the paint flow into all the spaces between the bricks. We can tease the paint into certain areas, but we have to do so gently as to not remove any of the brown paint used for the bricks. Once the entire surface is covered, we can soak up any excess wash from areas like the lintels using a dry paintbrush.
For the windows, I'm using a flat green, also from Vallejo. Typically I go for black or white for my windows, but today I wanted to do something that would stand out a little more. Using a thin brush, we apply the paint to the window frames.
Our last step in painting is to paint the windowsills and parapet capping. I'm mixing a gray using more Vallejo white, black, and a little bit of yellow ochre. Any shade of gray can work here, and looking back on this, I wish I hadn't added the yellow ochre. But like how we painted the windowsills, this gets applied to the model using a thin brush.
Like we did for the front side of the building, we can use transparency films to simulate window glass. Using an X-Acto knife, we can cut a rectangle of the film to cover all the windows with about an 1/8 inch of clearance on each side.
And of course, we can fasten this to the model using superglue.
Now we've got both the front and back facades of the building complete. To make the sidewalls of our brownstone, we can save some printing time and material by using cardstock. If you have several brownstones in a row, it is impossible to see any of the sidewalls from the outside. Using a thick cardstock or thin chipboard is cheaper and easier than printing parts you won't end up seeing on the completed structure. In a later video, I'll show you how to make a presentable wall for a corner building. We need to cut the wall pieces to be 5.5 inches long and gradually sloping between the front and back. We can use the front and back facades to determine the heights at each side, and then cut the wall out using our X-Acto knife and a straight edge. And we'll ultimately end up needing 2 of these pieces, one for each wall. Once finished, we can fasten the walls to the facades of the building using superglue. You may need to remove some excess transparency film so we can glue the cardstock directly onto the printed part, but this is easily done using an X-Acto knife.
And of course, we can fasten this to the model using superglue.
A roof for our brownstone is also made out of cardstock. We can trace the inside of the building to get the profile, and then cut it out also using the X-Acto knife. To simulate a tar paper texture, we can apply strips of masking tape lengthwise across the roof, overlapping each edge about 1/16 of an inch. This is a quick and easy way to get some detail on the roof temporarily. In order to fit the roof into the model, you may need to trim slightly after the masking tape is applied. Once in, we can fasten the roof to the model using PVA glue. It is best to apply glue all around the parapet so a complete seal of glue is achieved. Even though the idea is that we won't be able to see the walls in a row of these brownstones, it is still a good idea to paint the walls black so that light won't be able to get through. We can use a cheaper craft paint here, but we have to be careful and apply it evenly across the walls so it doesn't warp the cardstock so much. Once the PVA glue is dry, we can paint the tar lines on the roof using some more Vallejo black. We can also spray the roof with the alcohol water mixture so we have a wet medium to work on. Then, with a thin brush, we can apply paint to the seams of the tape around the glue seal to act as tar.
If you're not satisfied with how the walls look, like I was here, or if you want to make a scene with an empty lot adjacent to this brownstone, we can paint more of a masonry texture on the exterior walls. Using gray craft paint and a brush, we can dab paint onto the side of the walls to simulate a concrete texture. Once dry, we can spray a thin layer of the black wash and let it drip down the side of the model. This highlights all the little texture we put in with the paint and gives a more aged look to the masonry surface. If you want even more detail on the walls, little graffiti tags add a nice touch, as well as some patches of different shades of gray to simulate repair or maybe some inappropriate graffiti that was painted over by the building owner. And there we have it. Although it may not be entirely move-in ready, we have a completed brownstone that's perfect for any model railroad or New York City diorama. I want to say thank you to everyone who's checked out my channel so far. I know the audio quality wasn't so great in my first video, so I bought a microphone, and it's pretty cool. So I'm really looking forward to doing this more often. If you like this video, please hit that like button and share this video with anyone who you think would enjoy it. If you take a shot at making a couple of these brownstones, or if you have any suggestions on how to make these models look better, please let me know in the comments below. The link to the STL file is in the description. I hope you liked this video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye!
Fix my hair. Do a little dance. All gonna be on a B-reel.